I stood at the counter of Westfield National Bank, gripping a faded piece of plastic like it was the only thing tethering me to the world. The card felt fragile in my fingers, almost ancient, its numbers barely legible, the magnetic strip scratched and worn from years of neglect. I could feel the weight of every eye in the bank on me, even though I tried not to notice. People in suits hurried past me, indifferent to my presence, their sharp steps echoing against the marble floors, a stark reminder of how out of place I felt. "Excuse me," I muttered to the banker behind the counter, my voice shaky, as I pulled the card out of my worn purse. "I need to check if there's anything left on this." The banker, a man in his late 50s with graying hair and spectacles perched low on his nose, looked up from the paperwork he'd been sorting through. His face softened with a polite smile, though there was something almost paternal in the way he studied me, as though he could tell I didn't belong here. Maybe it was the way I stood, or maybe it was the clothes, worn jeans and a jacket I had picked up from a thrift store. "No problem at all, Mom," he said in a kind, practiced tone. "Let's see what we can find." I handed him the card, watching as his fingers brushed over its surface. He turned it over twice, eyeing it carefully before swiping it through the card reader. I had no expectations. I didn't need much. A few dollars would be enough to keep me going for a few more days, maybe even buy some food, something warm for once. The last few days had been a blur of cheap motel rooms and cold meals. His face changed in an instant. The polite smile faded, replaced by something I couldn't quite place. His eyes went wide behind his glasses, and his mouth opened slightly as though he had forgotten how to speak. He looked from the computer screen to me, back to the screen, and then to me again. His hands shook as he put the card down. "Ma'am," he said, his voice cracking, "could you please come behind the counter right now?" My stomach dropped. Panic rose in my chest. What had I done? Was the card stolen? Maybe it was too old and now I was in trouble. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Is something wrong?" He didn't answer. He only lifted the partition separating the customers from the employees, and motioned for me to follow. I hesitated. But something in his expression told me I didn't have a choice. My heart hammered in my chest as I stepped around the counter, feeling a strange mix of fear and disbelief. The entire bank seemed to fall silent as I passed, their curious eyes following me. A woman holding a baby shot me a concerned glance, and an elderly man whispered something to his wife. I felt my face flush with embarrassment, my skin burning under the weight of their gaze. "Please, just come with me," the banker said, his voice urgent now, as he guided me through a door marked private. I barely registered the security guards who appeared out of nowhere, walking briskly toward us. What was happening? Why did they need security? My mind raced through every possible scenario. Maybe Richard had set me up. Maybe he had some scheme to take what little I had left. Maybe this was some kind of trap. My legs felt weak, but I had no choice but to follow. We entered a small office at the back of the building, and Mr. Banks practically shoved me into a chair. I sat down, trembling, staring at him as he sat at a computer and began typing furiously. His expression was unreadable fear, disbelief, maybe even pity. He didn't look at me as he typed, but I could see his hands shaking. "Ma'am," he said after a long pause, still not meeting my gaze. "I need to verify your identity." "Verify my identity," I repeated, my voice cracking. "Why, what's going on?" "I need to ask you a few questions," he said tightly. "Can you show me your driver's license?" I nodded numbly, fumbling for my wallet. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open it, but I finally managed to pull out the card and pass it over. He studied it carefully, comparing my name with something on the screen. I wasn't sure what was happening, but I had the sinking feeling I was on the edge of something I wasn't prepared for. "What's all this about?" I whispered again. "I don't understand." Mir. Banks didn't respond immediately. Instead, he typed something else into the computer, his fingers moving faster now, his face tight with concentration. I felt my pulse quicken. What was he seeing that I couldn't? What was on that screen that made him so afraid? He looked up at me finally, his glasses slipping down his nose, and for the first time, I saw something like recognition, or maybe shock in his eyes. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "you need to look at this." I leaned forward, trying to make sense of the numbers on the screen, but nothing made sense. The numbers were too large, too many. I blinked, counting the digits over and over, but I couldn't make them add up. The balance on the account was more than I could comprehend. That's a mistake," I whispered. "There's no way. This must be wrong." But Mr. Banks just stared at the screen, and the expression on his face didn't change. He looked almost scared, Ma'am, he said quietly. It's not a mistake, that's your account. I stared at the screen, my mind unable to process the numbers. They were too large, too absurd. The account balance read 47 million. I blinked hard, trying to focus, but the digits swam before my eyes, blurring together like a bad dream. That's impossible, I managed, my voice a faint whisper. This has to be a mistake. Mr. Banks didn't respond immediately. His eyes flicked from the screen to me, and for a moment, he looked like he was searching for the right words. But there were none, apparently, because he just shook his head slowly. I've checked it 3 times, ma'am, he said softly. There's no mistake. This account is real, and it's yours. I felt like the room was spinning, the air suddenly too thick to breathe. I grasped the edge of the desk to steady myself. How could this be? My father had always been a simple man, a building superintendent, a worker, nothing more. He'd never been rich, never had anything more than the barest essentials. He'd patched his own boots with duct tape, for God's sake. He never even owned a car. So how could this mountain of money, be sitting in an account with my name on it? My father, he didn't have this kind of money, I said, more to myself than to him. Banks didn't respond right away. He turned the screen toward me, showing me more details, pages of transactions, numbers, dates, and documents that all blurred together. He started explaining, his voice gentle, but everything he said felt like it was happening to someone else, somewhere else, in another life. Your father was very careful, ma'am. He didn't spend this money. It wasn't for him. He wanted to make sure you had something. Something secure for when you needed it. Needed it? I asked, shaking my head in disbelief. I didn't even know it existed. The banker's voice dropped a little. Your father, he was a humble man, yes. He was a building superintendent. But he made some very smart decisions before he passed. He inherited a piece of land many years ago, in a part of town that wasn't much at the time. A developer came along years later, bought it from him, but instead of a one-time payment, your father negotiated a percentage of future profits from anything built on that land. I tried to focus on his words, but they felt like they were coming from a long way off. I couldn't process it. Land, a developer. My father had owned land. It didn't make sense. He'd always told me we were poor, always said we didn't have much, but he'd hidden this all along. Why? Banks continued, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. That piece of land, it was key to a large development project. They built the Hartley Tower complex. That's where the money comes from. For the last 20 years, 5% of all the profits from the complex have been deposited into a trust. That trust was set up in your name. I blinked again, trying to make sense of it. The Hartley Tower complex. That's the luxury development downtown, right? Yes. The one everyone talks about. The apartments, the office spaces, the retail. The one that changed the whole area. I couldn't speak. My mind was reeling, trying to grasp the enormity of what I was hearing. My father, who had lived a life of hard work and sacrifice, had somehow set me up for this. A fortune I'd never known about. And it wasn't just money. It was the kind of wealth that could change everything. The kind of wealth I never thought I could have. But why, I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why didn't he ever tell me about this? Why didn't he use it? Why did he let me struggle? We were poor. He worked until the day he died, fixing toilets and replacing light bulbs. I could hear the emotion in my own voice, the frustration, the hurt. My father had given me everything I'd needed, but he'd never let me know that he had the means to give me more. Why had he kept this secret from me? Was it out of pride, out of love, or something else entirely? Banks took off his glasses, rubbing his eyes as if he too was trying to make sense of this strange reality. When he looked back at me, his expression softened. I think your father wanted you to have a choice, a real choice. Not just the money but the freedom it brings. The freedom. I repeated, not understanding. He was poor. He never had freedom. He worked his whole life just to keep a roof over our heads. He never had what I needed. Banks leaned forward, his voice lower now, as if he was speaking to someone who could understand. I think he knew that money would change everything. It would change how people treated you, how they saw you. He didn't want you to be defined by wealth, Ivy. He wanted you to have it, but he didn't want it to define you. I felt a lump rise in my throat. My father had been trying to protect me, even from himself. But I didn't understand why he'd chosen this way. Why had he left me with nothing, only to reveal this massive fortune when I was at my lowest? What was he trying to teach me? Ma'am, Mr. Banks continued, the trust has been dormant for years. The bank tried to send notifications when you turned 18, but they were returned undelivered. It seems you'd already moved away by then. and you never updated your address. I nodded, remembering my time in college, moving from one place to another, barely keeping track of anything. So all this time it's just been sitting there, I asked, my voice faltering, unclaimed. Yes, Mr. Banks said, it's yours. The money is yours now, Ivy. Your father made sure of that. I sat back in the chair, the weight of it all pressing down on me. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of disbelief. $47 million. My father, who had lived in poverty, had set me up with more money than I'd ever imagined, and now it was mine. But the question still echoed in my mind, louder than anything else. Why had he never told me? My mind was still spinning when I left the bank, the cold wind outside doing little to shake the fog in my head. $47 million. My father, the man who patched his boots with duct tape, who never once complained about our struggles, had somehow set me up for a life I didn't even know existed. How could I even begin to comprehend this? I walked down the street, numb to everything around me, the city noise, the rushing crowds, the cold bite of the wind. It all felt like it belonged to someone else. I couldn't bring myself to go home yet. I didn't want to face my empty apartment, the reminders of what I had just walked away from, what Richard had taken from me. I needed to think, to figure out what to do next. I turned into a small cafe, one I used to frequent when things felt more normal. But nothing felt normal now. I sat at a corner table, staring at the coffee in front of me, unable to take a sip. The cup felt too heavy, too full of possibilities I wasn't ready for. My phone buzzed, and I glanced at it. Richard. I didn't want to answer, but I did anyway, because part of me still needed to understand. What did he want now? Clara, his voice came through the phone, cold and demanding. I need to talk to you. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of those words pressing down on me. For years, I'd put up with his selfishness, his manipulation, but this was different. What is it, Richard? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I know what you've found, he said, his tone shifting. I need access to it. You're my wife, Clara. That money should be ours. You can't just leave me with nothing. I could hear the desperation in his voice. The same desperation that had been there when he first pushed me out of our home. When he'd looked at me like I was a burden, a nuisance, a piece of property he wanted to get rid of. And now, the moment he found out I had something, he was back, demanding what he thought was rightfully his. I tightened my grip on the phone, my nails digging into my palm. No, I said firmly. You lost the right to that money when you threw me out. When you left me with nothing, Richard, you lost any claim to it. He was silent for a moment, and I could almost hear him trying to regain control. You're being unreasonable. We were married for 12 years. That has to count for something. I closed my eyes, blocking out his voice, the sound of his selfishness, his entitlement. It does count, I said quietly, but not in the way you think. I hung up the phone without another word, my hands still trembling. The anger was bubbling up, but I didn't want to give it space. I didn't want to go down that road, not when I had the opportunity to choose something else, something better. Richard hadn't been my partner. He hadn't been my equal. He'd been a man who used me, who took everything I gave and then discarded me when I was no longer useful. And now, after all these years of giving him everything, I was left with nothing but this fortune I had never asked for, this weight of wealth that felt more like a prison than a gift. But it was mine. Now, mine to decide what to do with. And I didn't want to spend one more second chasing the ghosts of my past, haunted by the man who had broken me. I was done being his victim. I thought about my father, the way he had lived, how he had chosen to give me this money without ever telling me. He had lived simply, always putting others before himself, always doing the right thing, no matter the cost to him. I had never understood it. I had never understood why he chose to live so humbly when he could have given me more. But now it made sense. He wanted me to choose for myself, to have the power to decide my future, not be swept along by the tide of other people's expectations or greed. The cafe felt too small now, too crowded with thoughts I wasn't ready to confront. I paid for my coffee and left, stepping back out into the city, the cold wind biting at my face. But it didn't matter anymore. The world felt different. I felt different. I was no longer the woman who had been thrown out, who had lost everything. I was a woman with choices, with power that I had never imagined having. I didn't know what to do with it yet. But I was going to figure it out. I was going to make something of it. For myself, for my father, and for the woman I was ready to become. I found myself back in the same motel room that had become my refuge, or rather, my prison, over the last few days. The walls, thin and peeling, seemed to close in around me as I sat on the bed, staring at the envelope I had found earlier. The yellowed paper felt ancient in my hands, as if it were a relic from a past life, one I had long buried in the back of my mind. My father had left me that envelope. It had been tucked into the inside pocket of an old jacket, one I hadn't worn in years. The handwriting on the front was his familiar, careful script. F for Clara, when the world gets hard. I hadn't understood what he meant by that back then. I had been 18, full of hope and dreams, about to start college. My father had always been the quiet type, reserved, never one to share his struggles. His sacrifices had been invisible to me, hidden behind the walls he built around our family. I'd always thought we were just getting by, making do with what we had. But now, sitting in this cramped room with nothing but a suitcase, and a bank account worth millions, I was beginning to see things in a new light. I opened the envelope slowly, as if afraid the contents would evaporate, leaving me with nothing. Inside was a bank card, old, weathered, its edges frayed, and beneath it, a small note in my father's handwriting: "Keep this safe. Use it when you really need it. I love you, Dad." I squeezed my eyes shut, the tears threatening to break free. How could he have known what I would face? How could he have known how much I would need this? How much I would need him? I hadn't even realized I was struggling until this moment, until the flood of emotions hit me all at once. The pain of the divorce, the betrayal by Richard, the loneliness, the fear of having nothing. He had seen all of it before I had. I felt the weight of the card in my hand, but more than that, I felt the weight of the choices ahead. For the first time since Richard had kicked me out, I was faced with a future that wasn't dictated by anyone else's expectations. It was mine to control. The thought was overwhelming, terrifying even, but it was also liberating. I couldn't stay in this motel forever. I couldn't keep living like this. My father had given me the means to change everything, but I didn't know how. Where did I even begin? My mind flashed back to the moment when Richard had thrown me out, how cold his voice had been, how his eyes had barely glanced at me as he told me to leave. Or even, he had said. 12 years of my life gone. My career, sacrificed for, is gone, and all I had to show for it was a suitcase and a 43. It wasn't just the material things I had lost. It was the trust, the belief that we had built something together. I had given him everything, and he had taken it all without a second thought. Now, I was supposed to make a life from the ashes of that marriage. The idea felt impossible. But I couldn't keep running away from it. I had to figure out what to do with this money, with this unexpected gift from my father. He had always chosen the right thing, even when it meant sacrificing his own comfort. I had to honor that. I couldn't use this money for revenge. I wouldn't be like Richard, using people for my own gain. My father had taught me better than that. But what could I do? The answer hit me slowly, like a light flickering on in the darkness. I could help others. I could build something, not for myself, but for women like me, women who had been left with nothing. Who had to start over with nothing but the clothes on their backs, and the weight of a broken heart. My father had given me the chance to make something of myself, but maybe, just maybe, I could use this gift to help others, who had been abandoned by the people who should have cared for them. I stood up, the decision forming in my mind with a clarity I hadn't felt in days. The foundation, at second chances, would be my way forward. It would be my way of helping women rebuild their lives, of giving them the resources and support they needed to start over, just as I was trying to do. I had the money. I had the means, and I would make sure that no woman ever had to go through what I had. I walked over to the small, cracked mirror on the wall, staring at my reflection. My face was pale, my eyes red from crying, but there was something else in them now. Something that hadn't been there before. Purpose. Determination. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was going to live. I was going to make something good out of this mess, no matter how hard it was. I didn't have all the answers yet. I didn't know how this would work, how I would pull it all together. But I knew one thing. I couldn't let my father's sacrifice be in vain, and I wouldn't let Richard win by dragging me back into the bitterness of our past. I had a new life ahead of me, and this time, it was mine to create. It didn't take long for Richard to figure out that I had discovered the money. He started calling me incessantly, his voice as sharp as ever, trying to mask his desperation with a feigned sense of authority. "Clara, you need to stop hiding from me." His voice crackled through the phone, the usual arrogance barely masked by an edge of panic. "I know what you found, and I'm not going to let you just walk away with everything. You owe me." I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down, refusing to give him the satisfaction. What was left to owe him? He'd already taken everything, my trust, my love, my dignity, and now he wanted the money too. Wretcher, I said, my voice cold, steady. You lost the right to that money the moment you threw me out. I don't owe you anything. Not a damn thing. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and when he finally spoke again, the harshness had been replaced by something softer, more pleading. I'm asking you, Clara. We've been through so much together. We were married for 12 years. You can't just shut me out. Stop using the past to manipulate me, I snapped, my anger rising. I don't owe you anything for those 12 years. You were the one who threw it all away. I didn't walk out on you, Richard. You walked out on me. You were the one who left me with nothing, remember. Another pause. This time, I heard the subtle shift in his voice, the admission of guilt that lingered between his words. I made mistakes, he said, barely above a whisper. But this is different. We can work this out. You know we can. No, I replied firmly, my resolve hardening with each word. We can't. You had every opportunity to fix things when I needed you. But you chose to leave me with nothing. I'm not going to let you do that again. I hung up before he could say another word, the phone call leaving me breathless. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It wasn't just about the inheritance my father had left me. It was about taking control of my life, once and for all, and not letting Richard or anyone have a say in it. The calls kept coming. Every time I blocked his number, he started sending texts, long, emotional messages about regret and apology, but underneath them, there was always the same demand, give me what's mine. It was sickening. I knew exactly what he wanted. He wasn't asking for help. He wasn't asking for reconciliation. He wanted the money, my father's money. I went to see Patterson, the lawyer I had hired, to make sure everything was secure. He was a sharp man, in his early 40s, with an air of confidence that made me feel like I wasn't alone in this battle. Richard's not gonna stop, I said, sitting across from him, my hands clenched tightly in my lap. I need to make sure this money is protected. I can't let him come after me, not like this. Mr. Patterson nodded, his gaze steady and calculating. You're right. We'll make sure that this trust is locked down. Richard has no claim to it, legally. You're the sole beneficiary, and no one can touch it without your consent. But we'll need to take proactive measures to keep him away. He went on to explain the legal steps we could take, but all I could focus on was Richard's face. The way it had twisted when he'd thrown me out. The way he had acted as if nothing had ever mattered but his own comfort. I couldn't shake the image of him in that moment, so sure of himself, so convinced that I would just roll over and give him what he wanted. I had to fight this. I couldn't let him win. Later that afternoon, I received another call from Richard. I didn't even hesitate. I picked up the phone, ready to end it once and for all. Clara, he said, the familiar false sweetness in his tone. You've got to help me. I'm losing everything. The business is collapsing. The banks are pulling out. The investors are pulling out. You have the money. You're the only one who can save me. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. This was it. This was the moment I had been dreading, the moment when he would try to pull me back into his web of lies and manipulation. But I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't the woman who had given up everything for him. No, I said, my voice firm, unwavering. I'm not saving you, Richard. Not this time. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. I could hear the panic rising in his voice. You don't understand. We're talking about everything I've worked for. You can't just let it all go. I'm not letting it go, I said, my words cold. I'm letting you go. You're the one who ruined everything. Not me. I hung up before he could respond, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I sat back in my chair, breathing slowly, letting the weight of the decision settle over me. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about getting even. It was about freedom. Richard had taken so much from me, but this money, this legacy my father had left me, it was mine. And I was going to use it to build something better, something that wasn't tainted by manipulation, by lies, by the darkness he had brought into my life. I had finally made a choice. And it was the one that was going to save me. The days that followed were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and decisions I wasn't prepared to make. I hadn't expected any of this, certainly not to inherit a fortune. It had come out of nowhere, and now, I was supposed to figure out what to do with it. The money, the responsibility, the sudden shift in my reality. It felt like I was drowning in it, I sat in Mr. Patterson's office one afternoon, the weight of my decisions pressing on me. He was reviewing the documents for the trust, explaining the legal protections that had been set up for me. But all I could think about was the decision that loomed over me. What next? I didn't want to be defined by this inheritance. I didn't want to be the woman who had everything handed to her while everyone around her struggled. I wanted to make something of myself, something real, something that mattered. But the weight of Richard's manipulation, his control over me for so many years, was still fresh. It felt like it was hanging over my head, demanding I either let it destroy me or let it go. You don't have to make any decisions right away, Mr. Patterson said, looking up from his desk, sensing my hesitation. Take your time. This isn't something you need to rush into. But I couldn't keep putting it off. The clock was ticking, and every day that I spent spinning in circles felt like I was sinking further into a life I didn't want. What would you do if you were me? I asked him, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Patterson leaned back in his chair, thinking carefully. Well, Ivy, if it were me, I'd use this opportunity to do something meaningful. This kind of money can change your life. But it can also change the lives of others. You've been through hell. You don't owe anyone anything anymore. But if you want to use this to make a real difference, I think that would be the most powerful thing you could do. His words struck me harder than I expected. Make a difference. Help others. Could I do that? Could I take this fortune, this unexpected windfall, and use it for something greater than myself? I thought of the women I'd met in that hotel, women just like me, women had been left with nothing, and had to pick up the pieces of their lives. The women who had no choice but to start over with empty hands and shattered hearts. Could I give them what I never had? Could I offer them the support they needed to rebuild their lives? The idea took root in my mind slowly at first, then growing faster until it consumed me. A second chance is a foundation. I would create a foundation for women who had been left behind, who had no resources, no support. I could use the money to help them find a new life, just as I was trying to find mine. Okay, I said, looking up at Mr. Patterson, my voice steady now. I know what I want to do. He raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by my sudden certainty. What's that? I want to use this money to help women who are where I was. Women who are starting over with nothing. I want to create something real, something that gives them a chance. Mr. Patterson nodded, a small smile creeping onto his face. That's a good decision, Ivy. It won't be easy, but it's a worthy one, and you've got the means to make it happen. I sat there for a moment, the weight of my choice settling in. This was it. The turning point. I could have taken the money, hidden away, and lived in comfort. I could have built my life around my own success, but that never felt right. Not after everything I'd been through. Not after everything I'd seen. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the real freedom, the real power, wasn't in the money itself. It was in what I could do with it. And if I could give other women the opportunity to rebuild, to find their own freedom, then maybe I could finally feel like I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. But Richard. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still lurking, waiting for a chance to strike. He would fight me for this, I knew that much. He wouldn't give up easily. He'd already taken everything from me once, and now that I had something he wanted, I could feel his shadow growing closer. I couldn't let that happen again. I couldn't let him tear me down, couldn't let him destroy what I was trying to build. As I left Mr. Patterson's office, I took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to walk it alone. I had choices now. I had control. And for once, it felt like I was in the driver's seat, heading toward a future that was mine to shape. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. I had thrown myself into creating second chances, pushing forward with the foundation in a way that felt both liberating and terrifying. There was so much to do, finding the right people to help, setting up the legal and financial structure, connecting with shelters and women's groups. I wanted to move quickly, to build something real that could make an immediate impact. But as the foundation took shape, I couldn't ignore the shadow of Richard looming over me. It wasn't long before I got the call. His voice was different this time, no more anger or demands, just a hollow desperation that sent a chill through me. Clara, I need to see you, Richard said. We need to talk about the money. It's not over. You can't just walk away from everything we built. I froze. I hadn't expected this, not now, not after everything. For a moment, I wondered if he was serious about working things out. Maybe he was finally seeing the error of his ways, recognizing how much he had hurt me. But then I remembered, this wasn't about working things out. It was never about that. It was always about control. I don't have anything to say to you, Richard, I replied, my voice firm. I've moved on, you should too. I'm not asking you for a handout, Clara. I'm not asking for charity, he said quickly, his voice sharp now. I'm asking for what's mine. You can't keep all that money to yourself. It's ours. It always has been. I felt the anger rise, the familiar surge of frustration, but I shoved it down. This wasn't about me losing control again. This was about standing firm. I had to stand firm. No, I said, my voice low but unwavering. It's not yours. You lost your right to it when you left me with nothing. When you tore our life apart, you gave up any claim to what's mine. Richard's silence on the other end was deafening, and for a moment, I thought he might actually back down. But then his voice came through, filled with venom, filled with the same old arrogance. You think you can just cut me off like that? You think you can take everything I've worked for, and leave me with nothing? You'll regret this. I'm not done. Not by a long shot. I could almost hear his fists clenched, feel the heat of his rage through the phone, but I didn't flinch. This time, I wasn't the scared woman who had been thrown out with nothing. This time I was in control. This time I had a choice. I've already made my decision, Richard, I said coldly, and I'm not changing it. You should have thought about the consequences before you decided to treat me like garbage. The line went dead with a sharp click. For a long moment, I sat there, staring at the phone, my hands trembling from the adrenaline. It wasn't over. I knew it wasn't. Richard wasn't going to let me walk away from him so easily, but I wasn't going to let him win. Not now. Not ever again. The next few days were a blur. I kept myself busy with the foundation, meeting with potential partners, organizing events, and reaching out to those who could help me make it a reality. The purpose I had found in the wake of my father's legacy kept me moving forward. It was the only thing that mattered now. But then the legal threats started. Richard's lawyer sent a letter, demanding a share of the inheritance, claiming that the assets were marital property. The letter was filled with legal jargon, designed to intimidate, to make me second guess everything. It was exactly what I had expected. Richard would never back down, never let me have anything without trying to take it from me. I read the letter, my hands shaking with rage. But then I remembered Patterson's words. He had already warned me that Richard might try something like this. He had reassured me that the trust was solid, that the money was mine and mine alone. It couldn't be touched by anyone, not even Richard. I called Mr. Patterson immediately. This is just the beginning, isn't it? I asked, my voice tight with frustration. It is, he said, his voice calm but firm. Richard's going to fight you for everything. He'll use every trick in the book. But you have the law on your side. You've got the trust, and it's ironclad. Don't let him scare you. I took a deep breath, pushing back the fear that threatened to creep in. He was right. I couldn't let Richard get to me. I had to keep moving forward, had to stay focused on what really mattered. I wasn't going to let him drag me back into his web of lies and control. But just as I was about to let the matter go, my phone rang again. It was Judith. My sister, the one I hadn't spoken to in years. I hadn't expected to hear from her, certainly not now. Clara, we need to talk, Judith said, her voice tight with an edge I hadn't heard before. I know what's going on. I know about the money. I felt my heart sink. What are you talking about, Judith? You think you can just take all of it for yourself. That money wasn't just for you, Clara. It was for all of us. You're not the only one who's been struggling. Do you think Dad would have wanted this? I could feel the familiar sting of resentment in her voice, the bitterness that had been there ever since our fallout. Dad didn't set that money aside for you, Judith. He made his choice, and he chose to give it to me. That's the way it is. But I'm his daughter too. She snapped, her voice rising with anger. You've always been his favorite. He always took care of you, always protected you. And now you're going to keep it all for yourself. You're going to leave me with nothing. I felt the ache of old wounds, the years of bitterness between us coming to the surface. But I didn't give in. I didn't ask for this, Judith. I didn't ask for any of it. But I'm not going to share it with you. Not after everything. Not when you've treated me like I don't matter. She was silent for a long moment, and then she spoke again, her voice colder than before. Fine. You think you can keep all that money. We'll see how long it lasts. I'm not done with you. Neither is Richard. The phone call ended, and I sat there for a moment, my chest tightening with the weight of what she had said. I had thought Richard was the only one who would come after me. But now, it seemed like my own sister had joined the fight. I had made my decision. I wasn't going to let Richard or anyone else take what was mine. But the path ahead was getting darker. And I could feel the storm coming. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about everything I had built, everything I had fought for, and I wasn't going to let them destroy it. Not now, not ever again. The months that followed felt like a constant balancing act. The foundation had grown beyond my expectations, but the cost of that growth weighed heavily on me. I'd built something meaningful, something that could change lives, but it had come at a price I wasn't fully prepared for. Richard's threats never stopped. He was relentless, using every tactic at his disposal to try and get his hands on the money, from filing lawsuits to sending endless demands through his lawyers. Judith, too, had become a constant presence in my life, in ways I hadn't anticipated. Her guilt and resentment over our father's will made her more determined than ever to tear me down. And yet, despite it all, I had never felt more sure of who I was. The foundation had given me purpose, real purpose. Every woman I helped, every life I touched, made me feel like I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something bigger than myself. I was doing what I knew my father would have wanted, but I hadn't expected what happened next. I walked into the community college auditorium to attend the scholarship awards ceremony in my father's name. It felt surreal to see the first batch of scholarship recipients, their proud parents looking on as their children stepped up to receive the awards. I had never thought of myself as the kind of person who could make a difference in someone's life like this. But as I looked at the students in front of me, many of them coming from backgrounds just like mine, the weight of it all settled in. A young woman walked up to the stage to accept her scholarship, her father standing beside her, a man with rough hands and a stoic expression. His suit was clearly a second-hand purchase, but the pride in his eyes was undeniable. The girl had a bright smile, and I could see the hope in her eyes. Her father caught my eye as he shook my hand, his grip firm. "Thank you, Miss Morden," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You don't know what this means. My daughter, she's so smart. She deserves this chance." My father worked hard too. Something inside me stirred, something I hadn't felt in years: gratitude, a deep, humbling gratitude for what my father had given me, and for the chance to pass it on. I smiled at him, at the father who had worked tirelessly to give his daughter a future. "Just like you," I said softly, glancing at the young woman. "Your daughter has a chance now. It's all hers. I just helped open the door." He looked at me with the same kind of quiet strength I had seen in my father. "Thank you," he said again, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for giving her this. She'll make the most of it." As the ceremony continued, I sat there, the weight of it all crashing over me. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the inheritance my father had left me. It was the legacy he had built, the life he had lived with so little, all while providing me with everything I needed to succeed. He had sacrificed so much, too much, it seemed, to give me the freedom to choose my own path. Later that evening, I found myself at my father's grave, standing in front of the simple stone that marked his resting place. The world had moved on since his death, and so had I. But in this moment, standing alone in the quiet of the cemetery, I felt the full weight of his sacrifice. He hadn't just left me money, he had given me the opportunity to create something that would make a difference. I sank to my knees beside his grave, my hands clutching the flowers I had brought for him, yellow roses, his favorite. "Hi, Dad," I whispered, feeling the tears start to well up. "I'm sorry it took me so long to come back. I found the money. You were right, and I get it now. I understand why you did it." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but the tears kept coming. It wasn't just the money I had found, it was everything. It was the love he had poured into my life, the quiet strength he had shown every single day. It was all the little things he had done for me, things I hadn't understood then but saw clearly now. "You were teaching me something," I whispered, my voice breaking. "You wanted me to have a choice, to have the freedom to make my own life, to choose how I used what you gave me. You wanted me to understand that wealth isn't about money. It's about what you do with it. It's about making a difference. And I promised, Dad, I'm going to make you proud." The wind shifted, rustling the leaves above, and for a moment, I thought I felt his presence beside me. Maybe it was just wishful thinking, but it felt real. It felt like he was still there, still guiding me, still proud of what I was trying to do with my life. I stayed there for a long time, the weight of the past finally lifting from my shoulders. There was so much I still had to do, So many challenges ahead. Richard would keep fighting. Judith would keep trying to tear me down. But none of it mattered anymore. I had found my purpose, and nothing was going to take that away from me. The next day, I went back to my apartment. I wasn't living in a mansion, wasn't living some extravagant life. I had a modest apartment in a neighborhood I loved. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that was enough. I knew what I had to do now. Second chances had already helped dozens of women. It wasn't just about providing financial support. It was about offering hope, about showing them that they could start over, that they didn't have to keep living in the shadows. And I was going to make sure we reached even more. I was going to make this foundation something that would last. As I sat at my desk, typing out plans for expansion, I couldn't help but smile. For the first time in my life, I was proud of what I was doing, not because of the money, not because of the fame or recognition, but because I knew I was doing the right thing. I had everything I needed now, and I was going to make sure the people I helped had everything they needed too. For the first time, I wasn't running from anything. I was running towards something, and nothing at Richard, not Judith, not anyone was going to stop me. I was free,